Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to Africa This Week with me, Khalil Charles. Today we'll be asking whether or not third-term presidencies are a good thing for African politics. Our reporter, Afsal, will take you through his articles that's caught his eye over the last 7 days. But first, this week, Pope Francis has had an eventful 3-day tour of Kenya, Uganda and the Central African Republic. Anissa Umar has more on this and the rest of the week's headline news.
Pope Francis arrived in Kenya on Wednesday for the first stage of the Pope's visit, which also took place in Uganda and the Central African Republic. President Kenyatta and elated crowds welcomed him at the airport in the capital, Nairobi. He urged Kenyans to work for peace and cooperation as the rise in militant groups threatens his first trip as a pontiff to Africa. On Monday, a 15-year-old boy died of Ebola in Liberia, less than 3 months after the country was declared free of the virus. The young boy tested positive for the deadly disease in a hospital in Painesville, in the capital of Monrovia. His father and brother are currently being treated for Ebola at a centre. Liberia has seen more than 10,000 Ebola cases and more than 4,000 deaths since the West African outbreak in 2013. On Monday, South Sudan's army declared that it will begin withdrawing troops from the capital of Juba, a key condition of the power-sharing deal between the government and rebels that seeks to end 2 years of civil war in the oil-producing nation. 2 units comprising of 250 soldiers left for Mugri on the Juba border road, following a ceremony held at the Presidential Guard headquarters on Monday. The peace accord signed in August requires the withdrawal of all military forces within a 25-kilometre radius of the city within 90 days, a period which ends this month. This month, hundreds of people in southern Nigeria are protesting about the continued detention of Namin Kanud, an activist who supports the creation of a breakaway state of Biafra. Kanu is a director of the band Radio Biafra and was arrested last month over criminal conspiracy and intimidation, as well as membership of an illegal organisation. The past few weeks have seen protests across the southeast of the country, where ethnic Igbos are in the majority. Biafran secessionists fought a 3-year civil war that ended in 1970. Last Friday, in Bamako, Mali, armed men violently stormed a well-known hotel, taking 170 people hostage and killing more than 20. Commanders stormed the hotel after an 8-hour siege. Since the attack, the Malian government has declared a state of emergency. Germany plans to send about 650 troops to Mali. But although shocking events still loom large, most residents have returned to their daily routines. Anissa Omar, Africa This Week.
Now, to discuss the latest on the aftermath of those attacks in Bamako, we have Celeste Hicks, who's a journalist on Malian affairs, and AbdelKader AbderRahmane, who's a geopolitical analyst of Africa and focuses on security and terrorism. Welcome to you both to the show. I'll start with you, Celeste. What do we know so far? We do know that 2 people have been arrested in connection with this incident, but so far, what has been the latest that we have?
To be honest with you, not very much more than that. After the attacks took place last Friday, as you say, the Malian authorities announced that they'd arrested 2 people. There are some photographs online of 2 people that they apparently died in the attack, who are said to be the attackers, but so far there hasn't been any identification on them. But as for the other people responsible for the attack, we don't yet know who they were, and nobody's been arrested apart from those 2 people. We do know also that the Malian authorities have announced a 3-day state of emergency and national mourning, and we're now waiting to see whether any further arrests are made.
What has been the reaction of the Malian people to this? Because obviously they've been through a lot of trauma in the last 3 years with the civil war and the French troops coming in to deal with terrorism and extreme violence in the country. What has been their reaction to this latest violence?
It's been a mixed reaction. I think for a lot of people, they were very shocked that this happened in the heart of Bamako. I've also heard that for some people, life really has just got back to normal quite quickly. I think there was a sense that for some people that this was a very posh hotel where expatriates basically went when they were staying in Mali, and it wasn't really a place that was frequented by ordinary Malians. So the fact that it was basically international people who were killed, there were a few Malians killed as well, but mostly international people. I think there's been a bit of a sense that this was perhaps not something that many Malians felt too connected with. And I think also that a lot of Malians have felt that there's been so much chaos and problems over the last few years that this was just one more thing that happened. So although there was a large degree of shock when it first happened, I think now reports coming in from Bamako say that life is getting back to normal.
Okay, thanks, Celeste. Can I go to AbdelKader? And AbdelKader, what do we know about the people responsible for this attack? Because there's been a couple of people claiming responsibility. What do we know more about who actually perpetrated this attack on the hotel?
Well, as Celeste said, we don't know much yet concerning those people behind the attack. So far, it is alleged that Mukhtar bin Mukhtar, the man behind, is behind this attack, but nothing has been proven yet.
We've also had reports that the Murabitun have an extreme sector, linked with AbdelKader, have also claimed responsibility.
Precisely, Murabitun, which is headed by Mukhtar al-Mukhtar.
Oh, I see.
Mukhtar bin Mukhtar, sorry.
So how has this impacted, if you like, on the security of the nation and indeed the efforts for counter-terrorism in the Mali capital and across the nation?
Well, the impact has yet to be assessed, but I would say that Mali is in a transitional period. The accord signs, the peace accord signed a few months ago, have yet to bear fruits. So I think the Malians are really cautious, and they still have to how would I say, they have to see the concrete results on these peace accords.
What have been the role of the troops that are being going into there? We hear lately that the German troops have also been appointed, and 600 of those will go to Mali. What about the troop build-up in the area to protect Mali?
Well, the troops, military troops in Mali will never resolve the crisis there or anywhere else, anyhow. I think that when the French troops were sent in 2013, sorry, this was needed as the danger was coming from the north and getting closer to Bamako. Having said that, there is the need for a real political and economic strategy to tackle all the numerous problems facing Mali and Malians.
You mentioned the economic strategy. Can I come to Celeste in terms of how Malians could now expect the situation with regard to the economy? Because obviously tourists will be in some way dissuaded from going to Mali. Celeste, could you give us any idea about how this will affect and impact on the economy? Because obviously a country which was expected to get about $160 million into its economy this year, that was its forecast, and obviously that's going to be affected because hotels are cancelling bookings, etc. How will that impact?
Yeah, I think there will be a big economic impact. I think people were already quite scared about going to Mali. It's been getting quite Sorry, that's my baby crying.
No
Sorry.
problem at
Do you
all.
mind asking me again?
Yes, I was thinking about the impact that they would have on the tourist industry and indeed on the economy of Mali, given that these attacks have happened.
Yeah, there will be a big impact on the economy. There's already been an impact on the economy of the last 3 years of crisis which Mali's experienced. Tourism, for example, has fallen apart in Mali. There used to be a lot of people who came to visit some of the ancient monuments and places like Timbuktu to have adventures in the desert with the nomads, and pretty much all of those people have stopped going to Mali. I was talking to somebody as well when I was there last week, who was talking about the impact on investment, which is really just the fact that people don't want to invest in Mali because there's just a sense that there's persistent insecurity, and that discourages people from wanting to put their money in it because they're always worried that there'll be another kind of attack similar to the one that's just happened.
So the question of insecurity, if I can come back to AbdelKader, this question of security, because it seems to have competing groups. Perhaps we have the Islamic State group and also Al-Qaeda, which are involved in that era. Is there a standoff point, if you like, between those two groups in the region?
Well, I think that the question of security in Mali has to be looked at from a broader angle. I think that the question of security, in other words, is a question of security for the entire Sahel region. We have to look at what's happening in Mali, but we also have to look at the chaotic situation, ongoing situation in Libya. And then in Nigeria with Boko Haram, and this is from how we should look at it. All these groups are in one way or another competing with each other. That's for certain. But at the end of the day, it is the entire Sahel region which is at a high risk to fall into those groups.
Do we know whether there's still presence of training camps and other things in that region? And do we know if you like is there a competition in a sense going on between those competing groups?
Well, we know, for instance, that after the French troops intervened in northern Mali and regained the main cities of Timbuktu and Gao, at the end of the day, those terrorists managed to flee and are still hiding in further north in Mali with the border with Niger, and they're still difficult to catch.
So those difficulty in catching them means that have they been, the places have been identified? Do we know the areas in which they're operating?
Well, we know, broadly speaking, we know where they are, but to touch on a precise point or precise area, this is something I think that has yet to be known.
Okay, so finally, Celeste, how do you think that the Malian government can deal with this issue in the future? What do you think they can do in order to prevent these kind of incidents and, if you like, build up the confidence of the people and the investors who have seen these events unfold?
It's a very complicated question, and there are multiple challenges facing Mali, and many of these problems have been known about for many years, well before the Islamists took over the north of Mali. It's talking about problems such as the Malian army is extremely weak and was unable to stop the advance of the Islamists when they first arrived in 2012. The Malian army still is very weak and hasn't been improved to any great extent. Apparently, I was reading today that it's the French who are helping the Malian authorities to investigate what happened. The Malian police and security services obviously don't seem to be strong enough to do it themselves and are having to get French experts to help them. There's also incredible problems associated with governance. all sorts of issues such as education, jobs, all those problems that are associated with poor countries, all of which would give people alternative things to do other than getting involved with jihadism. But the main problem we're talking about is security, and Mali is unable to secure its borders. Its police forces and its border forces are unable to do that job, and that's been the main problem facing Mali for many, many years.
So what you're saying is there's still a lot of work still to be done in Mali to build up people's confidence and to regain the trust of those who were unfortunately affected by the attack. Celeste, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your comments, and we'll be moving on to discuss the articles that have made this week's headline news. And joining me in the studio is our reporter, Afzal Ahmed. Now, China seems to have caught your attention this week, Afzal. Is that right?
Yeah, it has. So they'll be holding the first trade summit in Africa. You may remember 15 years ago when both Africa and China co-founded this summit. And it's going to be held in Johannesburg. And it's going to be setting in terms of investment and trade opportunities for the future. And coincidentally, it brings in the 60th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between the continent and China. Back in 1955, when they established the first diplomatic ties with Egypt. It's been going strong ever since then.
In terms of figures, what kind of, how important is China to the economy?
China is very important.
Yeah.
At the moment, they have diplomatic ties now in 50 countries, so they've increased vastly, and it is the country with the most links to Africa. At the time, in the 50s, the trade volume between the two continents, it stood at roughly $12 million, and now it's reached over 166 billion. And a lot of forecasters are saying it's going to rise to 1.7 trillion by 2030. So it's massive footprint that China has got in Africa.
But is everybody in Africa happy about Chinese presence there?
Naturally, they aren't. Of course, with the history of Africa, with colonialism, people see this as a new modern-day colonialism. So a lot of people are complaining of the lack of competitiveness in the markets now, and also a lack of jobs for African workers. A lot of the jobs have gone to Chinese workers. And, for example, in terms of the impact on companies, in Nigeria, the textile industry has virtually disappeared because of Chinese textile companies.
Okay, so this conference will be a first in a sense. And you do have another first for China. Where's that?
Oh, no, first, with China, now it's going to establish its first military base in Djibouti. So it's the first, it's actually the first military base in the whole world for China. They've traditionally kept the Liberation Army in terms of the role of protecting the borders, but now they are expanding, just like the Americans have, which they have criticised, but now they've done a U-turn and they've now established a base in Djibouti.
Interesting that they've chosen Djibouti. Djibouti has other bases there, don't they?
There is other bases. America has its only base there, present, so, conducting counter-terrorism measures, etc. France also has one, in terms of, and they are a former French colony, and also Japan, one of China's, you could say, enemies, are there as well in terms of conducting anti-terrorism, anti-piracy operations.
Indeed. And what's your third story that we're going to be discussing?
Third story, something also a key part of the African continent, the Catholic Church. The Pope is visiting, Pope Francis, for the first time to Africa. Indeed. So he's on a Free Nation tour. It started on Wednesday in Kenya. He's going to be visiting Uganda, then the Central African Republic. One of his key messages is for reconciliation between Christian and Muslim communities, because you may remember in Kenya,
Indeed.
They've experienced 3 incidents in the last 4 years. You may remember in Garissa University, where more than 150 students were killed. And 2 years ago in the Nairobi, in the Westgate shopping mall in the capital, where 67 people died. So, and he's going to be visiting Central African Republic, which for many of our viewers, it's a hot, extremely sad case between the Christian and Muslim groups, how they're killing each other.
Indeed. What are people expecting from the Pope in terms of his words? What do they think he's going to do or say?
So he's a figure of the, for millions of Africans in the continent. So, his words matter. So he's going to be visiting these 3 key countries to, give a message of peace to the population. He's also given other messages in terms of within the Catholic Church, in terms of the integrity of the church. I mean, he's given a warning on the dangers of the church being driven by money, because there has been concerns that priests are being attracted to the ministry of the church because of his vast resources. So he wants to, give a clear warning to those who are trying to exploit the church for money. And he's also an environmental man. In the Paris Climate Conference that's going to happen next week, he's given a message to world leaders that they shouldn't let special interests get in the way of cutting down fuel emissions, which the African continent is the continent that lets out the least, meaning emits the least greenhouse gases, but it's going to be the one. It's going to be the continent that will be the most affected. So that's why he's sending that message.
So a very, very important visit for the first time the Pope has been to, that this current Pope has been to Africa. We have another first again to stay with your theme of first thing that happens and all the articles.
And on a lighter note, you may know the company Krispy Kreme donuts. It's everywhere around the world.
Indeed,
in the UK, where we're based. But it's going to be coming to Africa for the first time. There's been a whole load of companies already establishing their bases, such as Burger King. Starbucks is also interested, and they will be opening up outlets soon. But Krispy Kreme is going to open in Johannesburg, in the area of Rosebank. So they're going to. Their CEO says that there's no one playing in the sweet treat space in South Africa. So he wants to be the first in establishing that. Interestingly, there's going to be 6 flavours unique to South Africa. Really? So, in addition to the top 10 bestsellers that they'll be selling, there'll be 6 unique ones. So I'll let our viewers, in South Africa, go there and let us know your views on how they are, how they taste.
Well, what could the flavours possibly be? They're so different away. Can you imagine?
Yeah. I'll let the viewers decide on that.
Great. Thanks very much indeed, Abdel. Well, after the break, we'll be taking a look at the ongoing political situation in African countries, such as Burundi, and asking whether presidents should extend their time in office beyond 2 terms. See you after this.